Perhaps the most memorable encounter I've had with anyone.
Welcome to the Own Your Commerce podcast, where leading experts, brands, and innovators reveal strategies for e-commerce growth. I'm your host, Jay Myers, and this show is brought to you by Bold Commerce. Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting bonus episode. I recently sat down with the CTO of Sephora and the head of sales at Orium, and it was an absolutely fascinating conversation, which we're going to share today. In this episode, you're going to hear what I would say is a very inspirational story of Sephora and the digital transformation they've gone through in the past few years, but also the strategy they're using today and really how it's helped them dominate in the market. So not just what they did, but how it's actually helping them see results. And whether you use their products or not, Sephora is absolutely a company you should follow specifically for their digital strategy. They're killing it. As well in this conversation was Thomas Mulried from Orium, and they are a leading agency for composable commerce. And my goal is really to leverage the fact that we have a leading agency in the composable space with Thomas and the CTO of a leading brand with Sree, and dive into a few topics and strategies around what they've seen work. Ultimately, my goal of this episode was to give you a better understanding of how you might maximize the return on investment of your move to composable commerce. And I do want to say, whether you're committed to composable commerce or not, or maybe you're composable curious, you'd like to learn more, or maybe you have no idea what it even is, I think that's okay. And I think this episode will be enlightening for everyone in all those different categories. Last thing I want to say is this was also recorded. There was a video that went along with this. You'll get a lot out of it even without the video, but if you do want to watch the video recording, Sree had some slides that were pretty valuable, and I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes if you want to watch it. Just click on the link and you can actually watch the full video. Okay, let's get started. Here's my conversation with Sree and Thomas from Sephora and Orium. Let's quickly introduce our guests here. Thomas, I'll start with you and then we'll go over to Sree.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I feel like we're making a habit out of these panels and podcasts that we're doing together. But my name is Thomas Mulried. I am head of sales here at Orium. We were previously called My Planet, but last August we decided to change our name, as well as took on a round of funding. But my core focus within the organization, I've been here for about 3 years, is really how I'm helping brands transition towards composable commerce. I like to say I've been working on projects since before it was even called that, back in 2020, before Gartner decided to actually coin the term. I was talking about the headless space and how you can make that change. So I've seen a really fun life cycle of this space maturing and moving extremely quickly. And really my main goal in Orium and at Orium as a company is to help people take this first step and get moving in a direction that they ultimately feel like is a better promise ground in terms of what they want to get to in the future.
Perfect. And Sree, I'll hand it over to you.
So hello everyone, I'm Sree, Chief Technology Officer for Sephora. I've been with the company for almost close to 7 years now. As Thomas said, I think composable, headless, and all of this have been there for quite long, and I've been advising that for many organizations. I was in consulting before, long ago, before this job. And about 20 years in the industry, I've been preaching about it. In the last year and a half or so, I've been ambassador for Mark as well, and explaining organization to take this journey of composability and the headless and the cloud readiness and so on. And I'm here to talk about like our journey at Sephora, and Sephora being a specialty retailer in prestige beauty across the globe. It's a massive organization, but at the same time, massive journey to undertake to make this transformation happen. And I'm going to talk about how it happened and what are the steps which we took. Yeah.
As I say, and bonus points for anyone watching who can guess how many plants Sree has behind him there. I'm going to say 6, but can't quite tell. I'm Jay Myers. I'm one of the co-founders with Bold, and we do a lot in the composable space as well. We are a checkout company, and so we help brands own their checkout wherever they sell. And we think that that's an important piece of the stack. And so that's what we focus on at Bold. Okay, with that, let's dive into the first thing we're going to do here is kind of, we're lucky enough to have Sree, with an amazing company like Sephora. I think they're an inspiration on so many levels. We're talking a lot about the technology, but when a lot of people know Sephora, they know it for the products and a lot of other things, but they don't know all what's behind the scenes, and a lot of that is what actually makes that amazing experience for customers possible. So you've been through a bit of a journey, and we're fortunate enough to have you with here. So I know you've talked about it a lot. So let me, we're going to walk through your story, and we'll be quiet for a little bit, and then we're going to discuss and have some questions after. I'll hand it over to you now, Sree.
Thank you, Jay. I'll start with the brief story. I think many of you understand what Sephora is and how Sephora came to be, and we have been in the industry for quite long, and we have been in the forefront of digital and e-commerce ecosystem since 1999. Right, so we have probably one of the first ones to start native mobile application for our consumers in the beauty domain itself. So with that said, I think we are also a retailer by heart, right? I mean, it means that we had physical locations, which are strong physical locations with strong advisors and experts, and which has been our core of the business. And in 1999, when we started digital, it was an accessory organization, primarily dedicated to making discovery happen and less about the purchases. But slowly it grew up to be a big enough organizational revenue maker, right? So that created this organic growth, and it comes with traditional liabilities of like systems and legacy operating organizations. So the journey for us started about 6 or 7 years ago, just a year before my time. But the concept was that we wanted to decouple the technology from like the underlying foundations, which are like, I'm going to go through like the mindset, right? I mean, which is very critical. And without understanding what that is and what is composable and what can it help with for an organization, you can truly take a journey in. So I'm going to walk us through like how did we go through this mindset and then skill set and then into the tool set. And tool set is for me the technology, right? So I'm going to just walk you through, and here I'm going to talk about just the mindset of like what are the key concepts which we kept in mind when we started this journey and years ago, right? So how do we become a customer-centric organization? Sephora has been customer-centric all the time. How do we generate organizational beliefs and the technology approaches with respect to the product mindset and the customer-centric approach of developing something with customer in the center, right? How do we then figure out the time to value? Because that's something which we always, any organization doesn't look at, right? I mean, we usually look for like how fast can we get to the market, right? But how do we get to a value is something which we have to consider when we take this journey on. And then prioritizing growth versus perfection, because I know that many companies focus on making it perfect, making it bugless, and so on. But at some time, I think you need to take a pause and think like, let's figure out what is the growth, let's measure what's happening, and then decide where we want to invest further. I think that is what this means by prioritizing growth versus perfection. Then creating a sustainable team, right? So that is the fourth part, which is you need to have teams which are sustainable and continue to support the roadmap of those products. I think that's the only way to get to delivering these composable architectures versus dispatching projects. I think many organizations traditionally have been going through waterfallish approach where you have teams organized around systems and tools, right? And you have then projects which are falling onto their plates, and you work on a project, you hand over the project, you deliver it to the customer, and then you move on to the next project. What you miss in this situation is the continuous roadmap and execution of enhancements and the feedbacks which are coming from the consumer. So having this a sustainable domain-based teams who are consistently looking at results from the production and results from the consumer feedback, and then optimizing it for the future. I think that's the meaning of sustainable teams versus dispatching by the projects. Building agility was the second thing, which I know I talked about briefly, waterfall and what that means, right? I mean, you gather requirements, then you design for it, and then you wait for engineering team to build for it, and then after a few months or maybe weeks, you get to see the product, and you may or may not fit to the requirement. So agility means that you don't have to get to the perfection, right? You won't know every single requirement from the consumer, but you do need to reach out to consumer as fast as possible, whether it is prototyping, whether it is doing something very minimalistic, right? And getting it released so that we can get the feedback from consumers. And we started this journey in a 3-year format, right? I mean, it's a massive organization with a large change for an organization to move from waterfall to truly agile. And I don't have to talk about agility and agile mechanisms which are out there. So if there are organizations still trying to figure out, I would say this is a great approach to start with. we started creating a small lane, which we call like express lane. And you might have heard this term like fast track, express track, or toll pass, whatever it is. It's a small team focused on consistent and continuous delivery of certain features in the consumer facing applications, right? So we started that with the year. It went through a lot of learning. I mean, I think organizations will need to get used to it. Teams will need to get used to it. You need to consider how do you then incorporate prioritization into your mechanisms, all of that. And we mastered that in the year one. And then year two, when we went with certain applications and certain teams who are ready to get onto this fast track. And we used to give it access OK or clean air pass, which used to get into this fast track lane. And we created multiple such fast tracks in the organizations. And year three, which is about, I think, into 2021 is where we reached year three. And we started this concept called product delivery model. So we organized the teams around domains and capabilities which can then be delivered, consistently updated, consistently monitored, and so on. So that's how we took it. You can also see how many people were involved, how many sprints of activity, and we are now at where we were before, approximately 8 organizational releases to consumer facing features to about like 52 features in a year. So almost every other week we are releasing something to production to consumers so that they can then test it out, figure out, and so on. And I have some examples too. Now you have created the organization which is independently releasing certain features, but it becomes critical for us to focus on what is success measure for every single feature, right? Every single things which we are prioritizing. So that's where KPIs come into play. Define the success criteria and make sure that you are able to measure that as well, right? As we go. A/B testing is not a new concept. So many people who know that consumer focused changes, especially going into headless, I think you will need this more and more because you are decoupling your website and applications which are more consumer facing from the backend technologies. And you need to make sure that every feature which is released independently is measured and successful using your challenges and controls. And then feedback. I think getting the feedback from all different mechanisms. I mean, you may get feedback from your customer support and client services team. You might get feedback from your NPS surveys. You might get feedback from other online surveys which we are doing for different measures. Consolidate those feedback and see where your product can improvise further. Where are you seeing friction and so on, and consistently optimize that using the same lane which we talked about in the previous slide. Make sure that that gets prioritized and it gets fixed and optimized for the consumer. On the technology front, many of you might have heard about the Canary release. I think that's another process of measuring some of the features during feature release process. How do you then release certain aspects of the features to the consumers, measure the technical KPIs of it, and then consolidate that back into the process. So that's what this measuring of outcome means. So these three things are critical in terms of skill set and mindset. Now let's go into deeper into what we did for specifically skill set. So here you will see how the teams have created. This is just one example, and we were lucky enough to start our composable journey way before pandemic, and it was just by luck, right? I mean, it was not planned, but I think organization understood the benefits of composability and the headless. We started that, and we were lucky enough to put the foundation in, and you can see how it went through the journey. So we had to revert. Our stores were closed approximately about 3 months, and the digital revenue was the only revenue which was coming in, right? So how did we utilize some of the features such as omni-channel journey, which we took, and it shows how it was released into production in an iterative fashion. You can see that with composability, we could achieve releasing features to the market, which is minimum marketable product, right? So again, there is a concept called minimum viable product, which I hate to use in technology terms because viability doesn't mean anything to the consumer, right? So it may be viable from technical standpoint, but it may not be usable for the consumer. So if you can make it usable, that's what I would call it minimum marketable product. And in this scenario, we started the journey in Q1 of 2020, just before the pandemic. We figured out that we need to quickly turn around and release something which is like reserving online and pick up in store. And we did that in just 3 months. We released it to the consumer. They started using it. We could see that about 1% of the total sales were coming through for the reserve online and pick up in store. But we also saw certain challenges, like people couldn't do the hard reservation. They couldn't pay for it in advance. So we started creating the feature 2, which is the buy online, pick up in store. Immediately right after, in the next quarter, we released buy online and pick up in store, and that allowed consumers to then pay for it and then reserve the product in the store so that they can go and pick it up. And then just the quarter after that, we had the holidays, and after that, the Q1 of 2021, we released same-day delivery, which was another capability which we enabled for the store associates to ship products right out of the stores into customers' location, making it available on the same day. So all of these features, you can see how it was done iteratively. In a monolithic ecosystem, pretty much it is impossible to do it, right? You either get all the requirements, go into waterfallish approach, and you release 8 months after something, and then you then discover that the consumers are not adopting. So this is what I would say, one of the advantages of composable journey is that you can make iterative enhancements, iterative launches, and also going back to A/B testing, test it out, get the feedback. As you improvise, you can then figure out which path do you want to take. Do you want to continue to do buy online, pick up in store, or do you want to do it through same-day delivery because there is more adoption from the consumer side? So we completed pretty much the journey of like omni-channel, and we continuously enhance it even now, adding new features to it. But this is just an example of like the total sales coming from the channel as well. You can see bottom, we are measuring how much of percentage of the sales are coming through each of them, right? So this shows you the journey by quarter, how it was iteratively done. Let's go into the technology side now that you understood like the business factors, what we could achieve through composable. So a few things which we changed on the team side, going back to what I was saying, that the project focused. Traditionally, we consolidate people to deliver certain products or projects, and we moved away from that concept to delivering certain capabilities. So omni-channel was journey, which I was talking about. So the team was cross-functional. They came from different application backgrounds, different skill set, but they were goal to deliver one single thing, and the objective was to make it omni-channel. Objective was to make things happen to the consumer, get the feedback, reiterate, and continuously improvise, right? So that is one thing which we successfully could do, and I think majority of our organizations have moved on to this new approach right now. Going to the next slide. So now let's talk about some of the technology specific things which we changed. I talked about composability, but composability starts from decoupling your slower components, which traditionally for the organization like Sephora or many other organizations, I think you have monolithic e-commerce ecosystems in the backend, which are slower in terms of releases and features. And how do we decouple? That's where headless comes into play. Then coming into the breaking monoliths, I think there are concept of buy versus build. We'll go into that later, but I think the question is, how do we make sure that the things which are absolutely needed and critical for consumer experiences, how do you decompose them, take away from your monolith and create that a separate ecosystem for yourself to create the agility which is required for the consumer side. Then moving to the cloud, it is more about optimization and scalability. I think I practically talk about building a church for Easter, which is don't build your church for throughout the year. If you just need it for Easter, just build it for Easter. And that's the concept with cloud as well. You don't need to completely scale up the systems for your peak volumes and the demands which are coming in. So that is something which we will achieve through the cloud applications as well. Then automate your repeatable processes. There are like so many mundane processes which you will have in the organization if you are grown organically. How do you automate it? How do you decompose and decouple that from your monolith so that you don't operate your monolithic ecosystem with all of these traditional operational procedures? After the transformation, this is a composable e-commerce architecture, very high level though. I mean, it doesn't talk about all the different factors, but it shows you how it turned out to be from where it was before, being one big monolith which used to do all of these capabilities. Now there are pieces of functionality. You can see the greens and the oranges. The greens are the ones which we use the traditional commodity platforms. The oranges are the ones which we have created in-house to create those agility for the organizations. And this is high-level ecosystem of different layers of e-commerce in the industry. And this is something which I've created for a template for our organization to use to figure out like where each of the pieces will fall into place. Right, so this is just to share with the rest of the audience here so that you have a reference architecture in place for your transformation. That's pretty much it. please feel free to ask any questions. If you have to drill deep into some of those, I think I'm happy to connect with you offline as well to chat about the journey and the details of each of those components.
Yeah, and I know I can imagine it's hard to compress everything you've gone through in the last few years into a few slides, but I mean that's a very good high level understanding of it. Would you say so you are Sephora is in a fully composable state now?
Some of the enterprise applications are still monolithic in nature, but all of the consumer facing applications, you can say that it's already composable, it's headless, and so on. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that. I mean, if anyone wants to talk to someone who understands it, I mean, and has gone through it on the front lines, it's always great hearing from your that kind of perspective. So I really appreciate that. Now, Thomas, you're on kind of the opposite side of the fence as an agency helping brands like Sree and Sephora and others like navigate to composable, but not just navigate. I always say it's moving to composable is not the end state, or like that's not the goal. The goal is to unlock new channels or unlock different ways of selling or own different components, but to maximize the revenue that composable can unlock. And I know one of the brands you've referred to on other panels we've been on or podcasts and different things is Harry Rosen as a true or another example of a great composable success story. And they're also a mutual client. We work together. We work on the checkout side with them. When you think back on that project, and I'll ask you about any other ones you have in mind too, but I just know you've referenced that before. What were some of the things you thought they executed well that set them up for success?
Yeah, it's always interesting to look back on it. I think you never knew what decisions you were making at the time. I think, sure, you mentioned, oh, we were lucky. We made this decision before COVID and all the stores closed. I think Harry Rosen were a little bit closer to D-Day as it related to that shift, and they had to move very quickly to the point of which there wasn't a planned e-commerce project in that year. And once COVID hit, once the stores were closing, it was like, well, we got to do it, so let's go get it done. But they adopted what is just launch quickly. It's not about the feature parity. It's not about the 15 years of your website that you're bringing with you. I really appreciated your perspective of it's maybe not MVP. Does the button press button? Yes, but does it actually transact? Are people going to convert on it? Once they got to that point, they managed to find the courage to launch. And what I like to think now is Harry Rosen is probably one of the most feature-full websites out there in terms of what they've built incrementally ever since. But to Shree's point, I mean, it's really just like, each sprint is valuable features for the business, but it's the fact that you've got to get live on the foundational layer to be able to take advantage of that. So I suspect that, I've seen many of these projects over the years, and the word we always hear on day one of the mapping and the features is feature parity, or same thing, or at the very least it has to do what we do today. The bit that maybe sometimes people don't realize is these are all best of breed technologies. So there's 50 things you don't know they can do that you can take advantage of. That means you don't have to bring, along what you've built custom. And all those little scripts that you run to make things work in their quirky ways, you might not have to bring that along. And that's another use case where I think they got there live, they got there quick, and then they managed to develop from there on in. And they're the most successful projects because people can get momentum and excited behind it, and then you can shift towards your more product-focused delivery teams, the team that works on the checkout, the team that works on the app. It's not about that team that works on the e-commerce as a whole.
Any other brands? I know they're a great example. Any others come to mind of examples that you think stand out?
The list is actually getting much bigger than it historically was. I remember back in 2020, you used to have to look for the 2 live case studies that had actually done this. I think, I've seen 40 or 50 different brands migrate from Oracle ATG, for example, or a lot of the SAP migrations are kicking in now. Like Express is a really interesting one. I think Lululemon have done a really good job building in some composable elements into their broader strategy. Ulta Beauty have a big multi-year model of how they're rolling out a lot of these benefits, but it's really when you're breaking down your channels and you're thinking of one technology to be used in many places, those are the examples that I always look back on, because it's truly omni-channel at that point, and you're getting the most out of the technologies that you're using as well.
Sree, when you were going through all this, did you have any brands that you modeled your approach off of, or any brands that inspired you at all?
No, I think going back to what I was saying, right? So composable and the headless and all of this have been there in the industry. I think we haven't talked about market as such. So when we started the journey looking at some of this in 2017, 2016, we looked at different organizations, but many of them had this concept of coupled architecture because it was easier for them. It was probably easier to choke one throat from an engineering to the business standpoint, right? Because there is only one person who's responsible for e-commerce. But all of these organizations had challenges of growing, right? And pivoting to the market trend, which is why I think I strongly believe that when we started in 2016 and when we launched our first headless website, we were the only ones out there, and there were not many. There are companies, I mean, of course, there are I came prior to Sephora, I came from Walmart. They have created the whole composable ecosystem in-house within their organization. And they were all way ahead of the game, right? They were already decoupled from website to the backend. So some of those were inspirations because of my past experience as well. But when I came into Sephora, surprisingly, there were not many organizations who has this monolithic ecosystem which had the decoupled architecture in mind. So that also became very challenging because you need to then educate the leadership and executives, explain them what is the benefit. And I keep repeating myself sometimes saying that, okay, you need to look at the opportunity cost about this, right? I mean, it's not about what is that you can do which you are not able to do today, right? It's about what if you are not able to do certain things, if things to change, right? So I think that is where I think many organizations were not there. But as I said, the larger technology organizations have been doing this for quite many years.
Yeah. Well, now you're an inspiration to others. So you kind of paved the way a bit. The title of this webinar is maximizing the ROI of your composable journey transformation. So I definitely want to hone in a bit on that because, like we mentioned, it's not composable for the sake of composable. It's composable for the sake of ROI in some capacity. But I'll ask this to both of you. Sree, I'll start with you. Of all the things that you changed during your transition, what aspect do you think had the biggest impact on ROI or revenue?
I think composability gives you the speed and agility, right? And how quickly can you turn around to a market condition, whether it is induced by consumer, like consumer is looking for a new trend or new way of doing things. Like omni-channel is a great topic to discuss about, right? I mean, organization like Best Buy, I used to consult with Best Buy long back in earlier stages of my career. They started omni-channel in 2000, the early 2000s, right? And when the dot-com boom happened, they already had omni-channel. So when organizations are still fighting to figure out how it is done, that's primarily because of their monolithic architecture, right? And the organization, of course, the organizational readiness of operations are there. But when it comes to, even if organization is ready to operate and they have figured out, there are architectures which are not letting them move at the pace which they need, right? And that's where I think composable architecture comes in, and that has truly helped us in terms of return on investment because as I said, the advantage of composability is you don't truly build the whole castle altogether, right? I mean, you just build one room at a time, and each room you build is giving you the return immediately, and you can see whether to continue to build the rooms, or should I stop at this point? I mean, all of that flexibility is there with composable architectures, which is truly what I would say the differentiating factor for return on investment, because you're not looking at millions of dollars of investment and expecting the 10 times of the revenue to come back. Rather, look at very tiny investment and then you immediately get the return for it, right? That's that, plus the opportunity cost, which I talked about, right? I mean, which is a key factor which many executives don't think about, that what if I was able to launch it 8 months in advance, right? I mean, what is the ROI which it could generate, right? Versus a monolithic architecture, which you might have to wait for a year to get to the return point, right? I mean, that's where I would say organization need to think the ROI calculation in different way, right? In the new world.
Yeah. I really appreciate the comment about seeing ROI in steps versus it being a multi-year project and you hope that it's at the end, but you're realizing it each step of the way. Thomas, you work with a lot of brands. What do you generally see as the biggest impact on ROI? Is it the same, or does it vary depending on the brand or the vertical they're in?
Yeah, I mean, and we've built a business case or two in our time. And if I rack my brain for what doesn't work, it's definitely not things like site speed. I need to get, 2 points per second off my load time on my homepage, or I need to bump the conversion rate up a couple of basis points. I mean, you can re-platform from Demandware onto Salesforce reference architecture and get that same lift. It's just old technology to new technology when you're doing the smaller stuff. I think it's tough for some brands to realize what the real benefit of ROI is, because the composability is what gives you that, to Sree's point, the speed and agility to move faster. It can be from moving away from what you're on today, like in a bold case where we've got a project at the moment, they're on Oracle, let's just do checkout. The rest of my experience is actually working okay. My checkout isn't. Let's just fix that problem and find incremental value. But then it's also, once you're on a composable stack that is at that Sephora stage, you become that composer of your composable commerce tech stack. And that's the fun part for me, where frankly, you just go shopping. It's, what's the visual merchandising tool I need? What's the personalization engine? The SMS thing? The integration model is just so much faster. The time to value is seen, and to oftentimes what you see in a development team is the shift from feature building and how much more feature building you do within your sprints versus just trying to get workarounds and keeping up. And then on the other side of the business, it's the enablement of your content teams, your product teams, your search teams. They don't need to ask IT to do stuff anymore. So an hour spent inside of Algolia, they can actually make thousands of dollars for their business without logging a ticket, or changing your homepage for a promotion. Without asking anyone, you can just do these things quickly, and that's when it gets more enjoyable or more fun for a brand. And I think it's not always a bottom line, look at our conversion rate benefit, but if you really dig into it, it equally goes down to things like employee satisfaction and how much more people enjoy their jobs and are more motivated to do well at that point.
Yeah, I was going to ask some other benefits of, besides revenue increase, what are some other benefits? But you both mentioned a bunch, numerous other benefits of composable, so I'm going to skip that one. Next question I wanted to ask was, one of the things that we've really seen in the past few years, especially the past 3 years with the pandemic, it's been unprecedented, is how fast the demands, and not just demands, but like the actual need of how customers have to shop changes. From 2020 to 2023, how you bought online or in store, or a combination of both, or at a curb or at a kiosk, or all these different touch points. It's all changed so fast. And my question to both of you is, given this seems to be the new norm, this rapid change of how customers buy, and in like 2 years from now, it's probably going to be different again. It's maybe all going to be AI assisted or something else. We don't know, but we know it's rapidly changing. What benefits and advantages does composable commerce bring to the table to help with this? Thomas, let's start with you on this one.
We're not gonna see less change. I think everybody's aligned at this point. We're giving up saying, oh, it'll stabilize and next year is gonna be an easy year. Nothing crazy is gonna happen. I think if every business is taking a pretty sober look at what's gonna happen in the next 3 years of what they need to do, it's more agility, it's more speed that they need to keep up. I think a lot of this stuff is like, you don't know what you're gonna get hit with tomorrow, and you have to be able to do it, or else you're gonna lose. And this isn't lose from the perspective of you might not get that one customer. I mean, we've seen specific use cases in the market now where, you lose by going bankrupt because you just cannot keep up with what you need to do as a company. And like, there's some companies literally naming a lack of investment in technology is the reason why they went bankrupt. And I think composable commerce is the next wave of what that modern approach is, what agility is. How do you kind of break down the barriers between different sides of your business and get them working together? there are some of the core compounding effects for me, where it's not so scary when you get hit with a shock in your business if you're built to expect it. And I think that's what, you know, composable commerce has to be rooted in, because you can pull in a loyalty engine if you need it. You can pull in a mobile app if you need it. There's more speed to market in terms of these things that you have to bring into your business.
Yeah, Sree, any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I will add to that, right? I agree that the organizations who are probably no more there or have bankrupt are because they have not seen technology the way it has changed over the years, right? I think traditionally organizations have seen technology as a cost center, and it's a cash burning machine, and it is a support organization. That's why it was always called IT help or IT help desk or all of this, right? Because that's what they think. I mean, and something is not working, you reach out to them. Versus in the current world, I think the technology is a driver of innovation. Technology is driver for business and even opportunity. Creating additional business revenue opportunities is done through technology. And composability, when I come back to composability topic, I think traditionally, I think composability has come around in e-commerce, and more we see the benefits of composability is overlaid with many different channels. Like, just talk about Sephora. I think the composable journey have created us an easier integration and bring in the same consistency, whether it's in the stores, it's in our partner sites, or even, like, you know, that Sephora is partnering with Kohl's, like giving the same level of experiences for the consumer, for the Sephora consumer across all channels, is done only through having this composable architecture, right? I mean, it creates that omni vision, the unified customer experiences, which traditional and organic organizations have grown, creating their own siloed ecosystem, which is because of the monolithic nature, right? I mean, you traditionally look at point of sale, just take like stores and digital. Point of sale is monolithic by itself. You have created an ecosystem which works only for stores, and you created an accessory organization called digital traditionally because you just want to have a presence in .com, right? And you created another monolithic ecosystem for .com, and because of the nature that they don't talk to each other, they have created silo organization of customer accounts and experiences and whatnot. And now the consumer demands same level of experiences across the board, right? And when you look at it, you can continue to invest and pour in money to enhance your experiences both in the POS and on the .com side, or all channels for that sake, or create composable architecture so that it can be consistent and it is available across the board. And that's where your total benefit comes in, right? So the consumer demand is changing. Yeah. How quickly can you change and give that consistent experience across the platforms? I think that's almost impossible to do multiple monolithic ecosystems serving only one channel at a time, right?
Yeah, I agree. So there's a couple things I want to dig into there, but I want to make sure I get to a couple points on if there's anyone listening who their organization is thinking about going down this path. You know, they're bought in, they get it, they see the benefits, they see the value. You know, Thomas, I'll throw this one to you because you maybe have these conversations with a lot of brands. If their organization is thinking about going this path, what is the first thing they should do? Where do they start?
Yeah, I think if I go back about 2 years ago, a lot of people's opinions was, I'm on this thing, how do I get to this new group of things? And let's go start building this package of it. What has happened is this market's moving extremely quickly. I swear what happens one quarter is not the next anymore. Now it's a case of these strangler approaches to get there are getting very creative in terms of adding value in different ways. So at Orium, we now no longer recommend the word replatform, because one, the new thing you have is not really a platform, it's a group of technologies. But two, in this economy, in this time, or in what you're taking on to your business, it's too much risk. You cannot afford a failed replatform project anymore. So really it's about finding those strategic approaches that make sense for the pain that you're in today. Everybody's in pain. I mean, that's technology. Everybody has found a weak spot in what they're trying to do every day. For us, it's around breaking down what is that pain and what is the levers that we can bring away from that limitation that you have today, and layer in one of these, you know, max solutions that can actually accelerate the change. And it could be as simple as a couple of components on your homepage managed by a headless CMS. Or it could be search on top of your monolith because your product data is not clear. It could be the checkout first approach where you need things like BOPIS and tax and shipping, and you just can't get it done on what you're on today. There's many, many, many different levers to pull. And I think really where we start is just uncovering the pain, lifting the stones underneath them. And then the second part is understanding the limitations that your older technology won't let you do. Because there's clear roadblockers that you can't get to. If you know them very clearly, then you can find those areas of opportunity in front of you and unlock them very quickly by finding the right technology. And the nice shopping list that you can find is on the Mac Alliance page these days. You can skim that one and get a lot of ideas very quickly of what you can plug and play with quite easily.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with you on the checkout component, selfishly. Sree, is there anything that you would say, so someone's getting started, anything to watch out for? Was, any gotchas? Like, I'm sure you must have had one or two hiccups in your journey. Any warnings?
Early, maybe a few years ago, if we were to start this journey, I think you will have less and less support, and there was no concept of Mac Alliance. There was no concept of like coming up with a reference architecture. So you make a lot of mistake going through it. Even talking about just one piece, which is composability of it. Like if you decide to build it yourself, and I think that's going back to the build versus buy. I think it's a hard decision. Many technologists believe that I should build it myself, and I mean I used to be that guy. But I think you do need to understand the business you are in, the organization you are in, right? And look at the strengths which you have and try to amplify the strength and differentiate where you can differentiate, but don't try to build it everything yourself. That's my POV, because you will end up spending a lot and not creating that agility which you are expecting, right? So that's where I would say, like going back to what Thomas said, I think there are so many platforms which are out there which gives you this easy couple solutions which you can just plug and start using it immediately, operationally, and also effectiveness of it. It's pretty fast and you can start using it. So try to use those rather than building it everything yourselves, and differentiate where you can differentiate. Like for us, I think we internally created our own loyalty ecosystem. I mean, even though there are products out there, there were certain unique factors of loyalty which we have, and we ended up creating our own loyalty ecosystem, right? So, but we did not decide to build everything ourselves. So, which again is a recommendation I have, that consider build versus buy as a strategic opportunity for you to think, rather than taking pride into the decision making, right? Because as a technologist, as I said, I can take pride in building everything myself, right? But think about what you are doing today and what it could cost in terms of agility. Yeah.
To keep going on that one just for a second though, would you have any perspective on building a monolith in a composable architecture? I've seen this one happen once or twice in my time now of, hey, we've got this thing, we launched it, but it doesn't really do what it promised. And when you look under it, you're saying, well, you kind of built the old thing on the new thing, and now functionally it doesn't actually deliver the value that you needed in your business. Maybe even from a bit of a technology perspective, like where can you see that happening, or where is that, taking the left instead of the right at the crossroads happening for people that may go down that route?
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. I think granularity of what you build, and if you decide to build, I think that is critical, right? If you end up conceptualizing the composability, but you end up building an architecture which has everything in one, which you are creating another monolithic architecture, right? So which again, people don't understand because they naturally tend to say that, oh, this is already there. I have already an ecosystem working. I have my server up and running. Why don't you just add to that feature to that existing server? And that's where you get derailed, and then you end up having another ecosystem to manage, right? I would say it's a decision, but also going back to one of the things, if somebody is starting the journey, I would say don't start the journey with people who are not familiar with composability and composable architectures, right? So start, and I mean, I have in prior experience when we started, I think I've always used a partner who have done it before, knows what they're doing, come and maybe co-develop with us, right? And that way you are also transitioning certain skill set in-house and then slowly then transitioning to in-house development teams, right? But if you were to start journey by yourself without understanding what you're ending up building, then you might end up in the old situation where you are, right? Yeah.
And I want to ask this before we're getting close on time here, but this obviously I can't go without stating it that composable is not for everyone. How do you think about that when where do you draw the line? Like I'll phrase it this way: what is the single biggest reason a brand should consider composable, and what's the biggest indicator they should not? Either of you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can go first. I think it is a
Sure.
strategic decision, right? I mean, it's not the technology alone decision. So if you're an organization, again, I don't want to tie the revenue to the decision-making process, because the current revenue doesn't mean that you are there or not there, right? I mean, I think where you need to think is like, how do you think your consumers are today? What is the agility which they are expecting? What is the consumer demand? Do you have current ecosystem and the technology which is supporting the needs of the consumer, right? If it does, and if it doesn't harm you or block you from growing as an organization, then you continue doing it. But think about like, when do you need to switch over to composable architecture in the future? But if you have everything which you need, which is working right now, I would say that's not there yet. Second thing is the organization itself. Like, don't try to force the organization to be composable, right? And this is going to people who are non-technologists. I think they should not just force the technology team to get into composability, because if they don't understand what that is and they've not been trained, they don't know the glitches and the pros and cons, they might end up building another ecosystem which you need to sustain. And I've seen that in the organizations. Many organizations have created this culture of composability without really looking into it, and they have truly spent too much amount in the technology architecture, right? So those are the areas which I would say that try to get an external perspective, right, about an evaluation of both people in the organization, the process, and also the technology aspects, and come back and see if this is something which you need. I mean, it's not like cookie cutter for every organization, for sure.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm pretty good for a good LinkedIn post about composable commerce, and people consider me quite biased in a certain direction, but you wouldn't believe how many people I tell not to do it. It's pretty phenomenal. I mean, there's FOMO and there's hype and there's buzzwords and there's, teams that think, hey, we're gonna go get this done because we're different. And revenue is not the metric. I'll agree on that for sure. I think maturity is probably one of the measurements that we could use, but it's not very tangible. You can't say you're a 6 out of or a 7 out of 10. Team structure is probably one of them, but the one that I usually come back to is business model. Like if you're on Shopify and you have a transactional website, a homepage through checkout, and you have 100 SKUs, you're good. Like, you don't even need to be headless. You're good. Like, the themes are fine. Get some nice add-ins in the marketplace. Keep scaling as a business. Do your marketing well. That's fine. I think it's when you go outside of the realm of what is normal is when you fall into that box of, oh, wait, there is no thing. I can't buy my solution anymore. There's an element of build. And it's not to over-index and go buy an open source thing and then start building. It's just composable commerce gives you more of the build capability than what buying a shop in a box gives you. And for me, it's always, yes, you have an e-commerce website, but what do you have outside of the e-commerce experience that will then impact your customer's experience? And I think that starts to weigh up some of the pros and cons of what composable commerce can offer you. But yeah, I'm pretty quick to say don't do it if I don't see it immediately. And yeah, I get quite a lot of people saying I want to go get it done when ultimately, they've got 5 years ahead of them with a lot more opportunity in front of them.
100%.
Yeah, fair enough. I want to answer a question here from the audience. I'll just read it out. Brands with a strong e-commerce presence have scaled even faster into other markets in the past 3 years. How does composable help manage complexity, risk, and cost in working with multiple payment types in different regions? Is there an intersection with payments and scale? I think, well, I'll just speak to this one because we do check out. Like, payments is a huge part of that. I think at Composable, one of the biggest strengths of it, specifically for us with checkout, is it unlocks selling in various, not just different channels, but different regions with different, like the multiple payment types in different regions. Like one thing that comes up was with us is, brands doing, if they sell any type of restricted goods, CBD, or it could be anything. Generally, if you sell restricted goods, you have to use certain payment processors, and they generally don't give the best processing rates. So but you're forced to use a certain one, and then you use that for all your products. But if you have the ability to create, and we do this, but different checkout flows depending on what's in a cart. So if if they have CBD products in a cart, use a certain gateway. If they don't have CBD products in a cart, use a different gateway that they're getting, like 1.4 processing versus like the CBD processes that they might be getting 2.9%, and change it by country, change it by region. So there's definitely a huge advantage that Composable can bring when you're selling in different regions, different products, different risk profiles. So I think that's actually an area where Composable really shines. I don't know if either of you two have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would add just an analogy, right? If you are thinking of fixing something at home, you probably usually use a handyman, right? He could do multiple things at once, but they are not experts in everything. But if you do need to do at scale, and you are going to a construction company and you're saying that I need to build 15 houses of similar nature or different variations, constructor is not going to use a handyman to do the job, right? So they have experts in specific areas. So if you have plumbing experts, you have plumbing experts for different variations of the house. But the key goal there is that you have consistency, and you need to give expertise in the areas where you need, right? So that's what composability is. For me, I am the construction guy, and the business is the guy who's asking me to build something consistently across multiple different channels, right? So for me, I would rather use composable architecture, which is very focused and expert in specific areas. So if it is about checkout and cart, I would not have a common ecosystem which is out there, which can do 200 things but doesn't do anything good that deep, right? So that's right. What monolithic architecture for me is, right? So for me, that's what I would say, that if you are an organization looking at like how composability really drives this speed, agility, consistency, and even optimal cost, I would say if you are composable, then you are at the right place to give that experience and the flexibility and creating that roadmap, as you said, Jay, that like you have different reasons why we would use a certain type of payment, and based on the size of the cart, maybe products in the cart, maybe the way consumer is and the consumer's preference of the payment. There are so many factors. Even personalization comes into it in deriving what payment you use. And if you end up creating monolithic, you just consistently give the same set of options for every customer, and they have only those options. And every time you need to add something new, then you need to customize the whole ecosystem, which will be another 6 months project to just release one new payment type, right? So that's not composability, and that is what I would say, that the composability gives you that delivering the features at scale consistently for multiple different channels.
Yeah. Well said. We're basically at time here. I had some more questions. I'm going to just end on one fun one. I always have I had a bunch of lightning round questions, but I wanted to ask each of you to end this off on kind of a fun note. What is the single best online purchase either of you have ever made? And this isn't related to Composable, just the best thing you've ever bought online and the worst thing you've ever bought online. Kind of a fun way to end, and then we'll wrap it up. Thomas, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think I've used this one a few times now, but I bought from Patagonia one time and could not figure out how to get their Amex to work on the checkout flow, and then could not figure out how to get them to deliver to the store that was 400 meters from my house. Ultimately had to then go through a different credit card and through the shipping policy to my home, just because I wanted that one good. So that was a pretty frustrating one. Luckily they fixed it since, so that one's definitely come through. And then the bit for me that is great, but great for the wrong reasons, is how efficient things like Amazon are. Everything shows up in 2 days. That's awesome. it's a shame that the boxes are twice the size that they need to be, and that they're like, not quite there from an efficiency perspective. But that supply chain model is just a great experience, and for anyone that can duplicate that on a direct to customer use case, I think is something to be respected as well.
Yeah, I didn't think you were talking about the experience online. I was thinking the product which I bought. And I mean, for me, yeah, I'll go for like,
let's hear the product.
2009, I bought, during the Super Bowl season, I bought a TV, Samsung TV, and that's my best purchase. It is still working amazing. I've never bought a TV. I mean, I have bought a TV after that, and none of them work for more than like 2-3 years. Everything get damaged or get recycled and so on. But this one, somehow it's staying still there. So that's my best purchase so far online, made without even looking at the TV itself. Worst purchase, I would say I've had many worst purchases, unlike you, Thomas, on Amazon, especially related to the marketplaces, right? I mean, I've ordered things which comes either broken, sometimes it doesn't even come, sometimes it gets stolen in front of the house. So many experiences, but unfortunately, because it's marketplace, there is only certain things which Amazon can do, and you are just at the mercy of marketplace itself. So I've had many such occurrences.
I bought a book one time that when I got it, it was literally maybe 2 inches by 3 inches, and it was I would have never thought to check that the dimensions of the book, that it's a full size book, but that's a current, I don't know if I'd call it a scam, but a trick going on Amazon. So always check the dimensions of what you're buying. Sometimes they're miniature, but you don't know it. So anyways, this has been a really, really fun conversation. I had a lot more questions. I mean, we could talk for hours. We're at time. We'll make sure we send out the recording to everyone. Thank you both for all the knowledge and insight. I know the emails are up on the screen if anyone has further questions or wants to reach out. And I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you both so much for being on today. That's it for another episode of Own Your Commerce. If what you've heard has helped you in any way, I'd love it if you'd leave us a review in iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. It's a new podcast, and reviews really help spread the word. And if you know someone you think that might benefit from this podcast, share it with a friend. If you'd like to learn more about Bold, visit boldcommerce.com. You can view all our past episodes, and if you have a story you'd like to tell, we'd love to have you on the show. You can apply to be a guest or suggest a guest on our website as well. That's all for now, and we'll see you next week.